I think that George MacDonald is like a hidden treasure.
He was an incredible influence on C.S. Lewis and the Inklings,
J.R.R. Tolkien.
All of those people owe their greatest debt in the use of fantasy to show the truths of God and of the gospel. They owe that to George MacDonald.
He was very well known in his day.
Queen Victoria was a fan, so he really had an incredible influence in his own time.
But most people don't know about George MacDonald. And MacDonald is really the fountainhead. He's the source of so much of the imaginative Christian writing that we're so familiar with today.
How have we learned Christ? It ought to be a startling thought that we may have learned him wrong. That must be far worse than not to have learned him at all. His place is now occupied by a false Christ, hard to get rid of. The point is, whether we have learned Christ as he taught himself, or as men have taught him who thought they understood, but did not understand him. Do we think we know him? Have we learned Christ in false statements and corrupted lessons about him? Or have we learned himself? Is our brain merely full of things concerning him? Or does he himself dwell in our hearts? A learned and ever being learned lesson, the power of our life.
When someone comes to see George MacDonald Faith Manifest, they will quickly find themselves in the presence of a man who is unlike any person currently living on earth today.
When I first saw Daniel perform as George MacDonald, I was really convicted. I think that the message of Faith Manifest is one that should resonate in the heart of every believer.
George MacDonald had a magnetic, powerful bearing, powerful personality. And it takes someone of the talent of Daniel to bring that personality to life. But in just a few short minutes, they will find themselves challenged, inspired, and given a brand new, renewed vision of what it even means to be a follower of Christ.
For the Godhead is still at the root of man's freedom. And the freer the man, the stronger the bond that binds him to him who made his freedom.
It's wonderful material, it's imaginative, it's thoughtful, but it's deeply theological, it's true.
Do you ask, what is faith in him? I answer, the leaving of your way, your goals, yourself, and the taking of his and him.
The Princess and the Goblin is a dramatic storytelling of this classic fairy tale, which is probably the best known writing of George MacDonald today. And The Princess and the Goblin inspired stories like the Chronicles of Narnia or The Hobbit. A lot of these imaginative works that we are familiar with today came from The Princess and the Goblin.
There once was a little princess whose father was king over a great country. The princess, whose name was Irene, lived in a large house, half castle, half farmhouse, on the side of a mountain, about halfway between its base and its peak. The princess was a sweet little creature, and at the time my story begins, was about 8 years old. Her face was fair and pretty, with eyes like two bits of night sky, each with a star dissolved in the blue. Those eyes, you would have thought, must have known they came from there. So often were they turned up in that direction. But I doubt if she often saw the real night sky, for a reason which I better mention at once.
Princess and the Goblin is an amazing experience. Daniel sings, there's rhyme, there's all sorts of interaction with the children.
It's incredible fun, a great story that has all kinds of spiritual truths and lessons to teach our children that they need more than ever.
Suddenly, they heard the sound of whistling. It was a boy coming up the road, and as he came, the whistling changed to singing. Ring, dod, bang, go the hammers clang, hit and turn and bore, whiz and puff and roar. Thus we rive the rocks, force the goblin locks, see the shining ore. Ha! The goblins gave a cry and scurried off. There, said the boy, that'll do for them. They can't stand singing.
I love sharing The Princess and the Goblin with children because many of the kids in these audiences come from broken homes, come from difficult situations. They've got a lot of things to deal with that kids 100 years ago didn't have to deal with. MacDonald, through these stories and through The Princess and the Goblin in particular, teaches them how to trust the Lord. I'm so thankful for his writings, and I want to just share his teaching as much as possible because he wants to share the teaching of Jesus Christ. That's his purpose.